I recorded terrifying tales from a cursed trail guide and found something darker lurking. I never should have opened that door. It was a simple old wooden door, weathered with age, but it held secrets I wasn't prepared for. It had always been there, barely noticeable, hidden in shadows. But that night, curiosity nagged at me, pulling me closer, whispering promises of extraordinary things. I was just an ordinary person, living an ordinary life, capturing stories from the guide's tales. Each story was more chilling than the last. The cursed trail where the guide led hikers through dense woods, marked by unsettling silence and strange sounds that could send chills down anyone's spine. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves surrounded me on every adventure, but offered only fleeting comfort against the weight of dread. On that fateful evening, the shadows were long, stretching like fingers across the ground. The air was unnaturally cold. My heart raced as I listened to the wind rustling through the trees like whispers. No one else was around. Just me, the door, and the sinister pull of the unknown. Suddenly, a branch snapped. My body stiffened. I froze for a moment, straining to hear beyond my rapid breaths. The world felt heavier. Shadows danced closer. A soft thud echoed behind me. Was it just leaves? Or something more, something alive? I glanced back at the door. Creaked slightly, almost invitingly. The allure grew unbearable. Hands trembling, I reached for the knob. Turned smoothly, like it was waiting for me. A sudden rush of adrenaline screamed at me to stop, to turn back. But the stories, each one was a thread woven with dread, and I was entangled in their grip. The door swung open with a haunting groan. I stepped inside, drawn into the thick darkness. My breath quickened. I felt the gust of cold air washing over me, turning my skin to goosebumps. The room smelled ancient, like rust and something rotten. I could hear whispers. It wasn't the wind. Felt like voices swirling around me, chilling, beckoning. Then I saw it. A figure stood at the far corner, cloaked in shadows. Just a silhouette. My heart slammed against my ribs, ready to escape. What was it? I couldn't see its face, but I felt its gaze bore into me. An inexplicable weight hanging in the air. I was paralyzed, unsure whether to flee or approach. And just then, the door slammed shut behind me. My breath caught in my throat. Darkness engulfed me. Panic surged like ice in my veins. I spun around, desperation clawing at my mind. What was happening? The whispers grew louder, more insistent. My body screamed to run, to hide, but my legs felt rooted in place, a prisoner. Then the figure advanced. I couldn't see its features. It simply loomed, a mass of darkness and terror. I barely managed a gasp, and before I could react, the room erupted in silence. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence wrapped around me like a thick fog, suffocating and ominous. I felt the weight of the figure's presence, an overwhelming force pressing against my chest. The whispers had halted, replaced by an eerie stillness that seemed to vibrate with palpable tension. I couldn't even discern if I was still breathing. The figure shifted slightly, a mere quiver in the darkness, a reminder that it was indeed there, watching me. I strained to make out any detail, yet the shadows clung to it like a cloak, revealing nothing but an unfathomable void. Was it merely my panic weighing heavily on my senses, or did I feel a slight tug towards it? Something beckoned me to step closer, to reach out into the unknown. Who are you? My voice cracked, trembling in the silence, a shattering glass lost in a storm. No answer came, only an unsettling stillness that seemed to swallow my words whole. With each passing second, the void felt more alive, as if the darkness itself were breathing, anticipating my next move. Then, a low, guttural rasp escaped from the figure, reverberating against the walls. I recoiled instinctively, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. Was it even capable of speech? As if sensing my fear, it swayed forward, maintaining a deliberate crawl toward me. I instinctively stepped back, pressing against the rough wooden wall, my heart pounding like a drum signaling danger. "Stop!" I shouted. In that moment of noise, I heard it, the faintest glimmer of a response. An echo of my own voice twisted around me like a cruel joke. My breath hitched. The door I came through had vanished, the space now a void, existing in a realm with no light and no boundaries. I was ensnared in a nightmare, locked within its grasp. The figure grabbed my attention again, now with a hand reaching out, elongated fingers stretching towards me like claws. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to break away from this forsaken place. But I could only stare as those shadows danced around the hand, morphing and shifting, creating grotesque shapes as it reached closer. I felt the chill wash over me, tasting the rancid breath of fear. "Leave," I whispered, more to myself than a plea to whatever haunted me. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing it all away, but when I opened them, the darkness remained steadfast, a yawning abyss that had no intention of permitting me an escape. Panic surged anew, a suffocating grip on my throat. Suddenly, the whispers returned sudden and sharp, like shards of ice sliding down my spine. They wove through my mind like barbed wire, snippets of the guide-us tales rushing back with fevered intensity. Lost souls wandering forever, mournful cries cloaked in the night, trails that led only to despair. My heart raced. The stories weren't just cautionary tales, they were a warning, an omen of what I had unleashed. In that darkness, the figure's silhouette took a more defined shape. The voice was clearer, now a low chant, repeating a word that broke through the haze. "Feed, feed, feed." The claws were inches from my face, a chilling promise lingering in the air. I could feel the encroaching shadow wrapping around me like chains, soaking into my skin. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned blindly and dashed toward where I thought the door had been, my hand outstretched, desperate for an exit. Yet, my body slammed into nothingness, the void mocking my attempt to flee. I felt myself slip into a treacherous echo, a phantom step in this dark abyss. The whispers crescendoed to a frenzy, deafening and pounding. I screamed, but the trembling walls swallowed my voice. As I turned back to face the figure in a full-blown panic, it was no longer just a specter. There was something else lurking behind it, something far more sinister. Glowing eyes emerged from the shadows, reflecting a cruel hunger that made my heart freeze. That I realized then. Whatever it was that I had opened wasn't a mere door. It felt like a portal to something darker, something that craved not just to exist, but to consume. As I backed away, I stumbled, and the ground beneath me began to tremble, splintering like the skeletal roots of the cursed trail. Then the world shattered around me, and everything went black. I awoke disoriented, lying on something hard and cold. The familiar stench of damp earth filled my nostrils as I pushed myself up, shaking bits of dislodged dirt from my clothes. My heart thudded wildly against my ribcage, every beat a reminder of my narrow escape from whatever had clutched at me in the dark. As I blinked away the haze of confusion, I realized I was no longer in the wooden room but outside, surrounded by an unnerving stillness permeating the night. The moon hung low, casting an eerie glow across a dense forest that loomed all around, towering trees stretching high into a vast expanse of darkness. This was not the path I had taken. This place felt alien, imbued with a heavy weight of dread. I could sense the air thick with anticipation. The forest seemed alive and aware, pulsing with a breath of its own. Panic surged again, and I stumbled to my feet. I tried to remember the stories of the guide, the warnings echoing in my mind like faint drumbeats. Pieces were missing, the truth obscured, but one thing was clear. I had awakened something. A terrifying realization washed over me, and all at once, I felt its hunger lingering at the edges of my consciousness. As I turned to navigate back what I thought was the correct way, something rustled in the underbrush to my left. I froze, heart pounding, and peered through the tangled shadows, hoping for nothing to emerge. But there it was, a figure, hunched and grotesque, dragging a slender arm across its components like an old marionette on fraying strings. The shadows danced, providing short glimpses of its thin, almost skeletal body, a visage twisted with a jagged smile that bore too many teeth. "Help us," it rasped, the sound echoing through the air like crumpled leaves underfoot. Each word distorted and elongated the distance between us, making me question whether it was inviting me to help or luring me into its world of despair. My instincts kicked in. I turned to run, but a creeping sensation held me rooted to the spot, tugging at my very being. I felt the whispers circling again, wrapping tight around my brain like a serpent squeezing its prey. "Join us, it's better in the dark, never alone." The words entwined with my thoughts, ricocheting around like echoes in a vast cavern. With a surge of willpower, I tore my gaze from the figure and stumbled backward, only to collide with another unseen presence, lurking just beyond the trees. My heart stopped. "Stay with me." It beckoned, its voice low and velvety, slinking through the air with a seduction I instantly distrusted. The ground beneath me reacted violently, vibrating with an ominous energy. As I teetered on my feet, I looked back toward the original figure, which had shifted closer but was not alone anymore. Shadows spilled from the trees, oozing into the open like a dark tide, merging into an amorphous mass with shifting forms and eyes, so many eyes gleaming with malevolent intent that I ran, fueled purely by survival instincts, barreling deeper into the forest. Thorns snagged at my arms and legs, biting into my flesh, but I paid them no mind. The sound of them pursuing grew louder behind me, chants intertwining with the rustle of leaves, a ghastly symphony underscoring my frantic escape. "Join us, join us." The collective whisper twined with the very marrow of my bones, drowning out my thoughts. Panic seized me as I stumbled into a clearing. The trees bowed inward, as if spectators to an unspeakable gathering. At the center stood a massive stone altar, slick with ancient moisture and adorned with twisted roots, grotesque carvings, and offerings of desiccated remnants, the shadows whispering fervently. I barely caught the glimmer of light reflecting off of something embedded in the altar, a blade, slick and glinting with an otherworldly brightness, pulsating like a heartbeat. Just as I turned to see if I could use it for survival, I felt it again, the creeping, cold sensation creeping up my back. Invisible hands weighed heavily on my shoulders as a collective murmur rose to a crescendo, spinning words into a tornado of maddening cries. "Feed, feed, feed." They were closing in, the very terrain seeming to shift around me, rooting me to this cursed ground. I heard a voice, deep and gravelly, rising above the others. "You have what we seek," it whispered, "and it's time to pay the price." A pair of glowing eyes locked onto me, piercing through the shadows, an allure so strong it felt inevitable. Every instinct told me to run, but the urge to succumb to the darkness grew unbearable. The ripping whispers reached a deafening pitch, wrapping around my sanity, and at that moment something shifted at the altar. The shadows transformed before my eyes, reaching out toward me with desperate fingers twisting into claws as a monstrous form began to emerge. In that moment of terror, I knew I was not merely being hunted. I was on the cusp of becoming something unfathomable. And then it stepped into the light, its jagged teeth bared in a smile that radiated pure madness that I gasped, feeling the ground begin to quake beneath us. With a final surge of dread, the altar trembled, pulling me toward it in a sinister grip. "Join us, it's too late to run." As the darkness surged forward, I realized just how far I had wandered into this nightmare of my own making, and then I understood there would be no escape. The air thickened as I felt myself being drawn toward the altar, an insidious force coiling around my limbs, anchoring me in place. The realization that I was not alone pulsed in my veins. Shadowy figures rippled behind me, their forms shrouded in darkness, impossible to discern fully, but their intent was palpable, a ravenous hunger for something they believed I possessed. "Help us," the first figure rasped again, creeping toward me, its gaunt form moving fluidly as if gliding over the ground. I could see now that its skin was mottled and raw, a surreal blend of human and something other. Despite the terror surging through me, a part of my mind wrestled with the image I had to resist. I had to fight against whatever insidious force compelled me toward them. But my body betrayed me, caught in the invisible snare, as the shadows began to stretch and writhe like serpents, searching just like the figures themselves. You see her, don't you? A voice coiled around my senses, dripping honeyed malice. The one who wanders forever, her skin knows the weight of despair. Just as you shall. I glanced upward in a panic, searching for any sign of escape, but the towering trees stood unyieldingly around me, their gnarled limbs twisted like frozen fingers, obscuring any hope of a way out. You belong to us now, just as she did. The voice continued a chilling consolation. I turned back to the altar, spotting the blade once more, but the shadows encroached, thriving on my hesitance. With a burst of desperation, I pulled at my mind, screaming internally to break free from their manipulation. The energy around me pulsed, fluctuating with my emotions. And then, a terrible clarity erupted within me. I understood I had not stumbled upon merely a cursed site but a gateway, meticulously crafted to ensnare souls and bind them to an eternal craving for suffering. Enough! I roared, shaking violently as the murmuring crescendoed, each whisper fueled by the tension, my defiance igniting the darkness. I will not join you. The ground rumbled violently beneath me as if the very earth recoiled at my declaration, and the shadows writhed, momentarily shaken, but not for long. Join us, the chorus screeched in response, angry and possessive. A burst of luminescent energy ignited from the altar, taking the figure before me, the one who had beckoned me in that twisted dance of horror. The grotesque visage contorted, morphing amid blinding light until it became unrecognizable, more primal yet beautiful in its malevolence. In that fleeting moment of turmoil, I saw it, a glimpse of their reality, a vision of what it meant to belong within this dark tapestry woven of torment and rage. My heart began to synchronize with the pulsing energy of the altar. A terrible magnetism gripped me, trying to ensnare me within its folds. Only one more sacrifice is needed, the entity sang in a twisted melody. Flee and you shall never escape, or embrace the dark, and you will be free. With frantic resolve, I lunged for the blade, the cold steel offering a curious sense of comfort. Would I wield it against the darkness, or would I become just another lost soul in the forest? The shadows recoiled as if repelled by my movement, and yet they surged forward, biting at my heels like some primal instinct of fear, hunger wrapping tighter with every beat of my heart. Just as I grasped the hilt, a wave of energy surged through my body, a violent flash of memories, of every haunting moment that had brought me here, flickered in my mind like scattered shards of glass. Faces of those who had come before me swirled, each wretched and longing for release, thrumming at the edges of existence, desperate and beseeching. Feed your darkness. Feed it. Their voices howled in a macabre symphony, and I felt my grip falter, battling between the pull of the shadows and the bright glimmer of obscured freedom beckoning from the blade. In that surreal haze, I caught a glimpse of myself, a reflection in the steel that warped and twisted, revealing a sinister grin not of my own making. My heart stilled as dread took hold. Nothing was sacred anymore. I was teetering on the brink, and in that fragile moment, the realization whispered through every shimmering echo. To join was not to be lost, but to embrace my destiny as one with the darkness. Before I could wrestle with that revelation, the ground erupted beneath me, a tremor that felt like the very heartbeat of the forest, as the shadows surged anew. The figures swarmed, faceless and ravenous, and I was torn between the blade and their call, both promising salvation but offering damnation. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the impact, and just then, I was lifted off the ground, the blade clattering away as shadows encased me in their chilling embrace, dragging me toward the altar, toward the horror that awaited beneath the obsidian sky. With hope etched in desperation, I screamed into the void, desperate to escape the fate that awaited me. But as everything faded to black, I realized I had become the subject of the very tales that had led me here, a living testament to the curse of the guide. Forever drawn to the darkness that hungered, and like a marionette grasped by puppet strings, I felt my last shred of autonomy slip away. The forest exhaled, resonating with a satisfying glee, as the shadows enveloped me completely, ready to unveil their darkest secret. The shadows coiled around me, their grip tightening, as darkness seeped into every crevice of my mind. I was no longer merely a spectator. I had become a part of this grotesque theater of the damned. The chorus of pain and regret welcomed me with chilling reverberations, and as I was drawn closer to the altar, every facet of my being screamed in protest. "Welcome back," the first figure whispered, its voice a cacophony of raspy wheezes and tortured cries, harmonizing with the thrumming below. "You've come to live amongst us. Haven to you? We've waited so long for another to take her place." I felt myself hovering, caught in a purgatorial limbo between decay and malevolence. The altar loomed, its surface polished by centuries of blood and sorrow. Newer offerings lay scattered around, the remnants of those who had succumbed to the call over the years. I felt bile rise in my throat as I locked eyes with a charred doll, its painted visage contorted in a silent scream, eyes wide in frozen horror. "What are you?" I confronted the figure that now stood before me, its translucent form shaped like a man but devoid of humanity. The shadows danced in response, weaving patterns of despair, as if slithering beneath my skin. "You know what we are," it rasped, revealing what once was a face, now just a collection of voids. "We are the lost, the forsaken. We bind the darkness and it binds us." There was truth in its words, a sinister clarity that chilled me to the bone. With each heartbeat, I felt the altaress energy ebb and flow like a terrible tide, and I sensed the whispers of the past, the cries of previous souls lingers beneath the surface, yearning for release but never finding it. "What do you want from me?" My voice wavered, the tremor reflecting both fear and a deep, insatiable curiosity to understand. "You hold the key," it said, tilting its head grotesquely. "You were chosen to complete our cycle. Embrace the fury within, and we shall be united in eternal night." Suddenly, a cacophony of memories crashed through the mist that clouded my mind, images seeping into my consciousness like ink in water. I saw my friends laughing around a campfire, their faces lit by joy before being swallowed by the night. I witnessed their pleading eyes as they tried to warn me, obstacles I brushed aside as mere figments of my imagination. The woods had been alive with untold terror long before I ever arrived. "No!" I shouted, shaking my head violently, as if I could physically dislodge the visions threatening to engulf me. I refused to be part of this. The figures around me shuddered, a collective response of agony and fury. "Refusal is a form of acceptance," they howled, the words clawing at my mind, each syllable laced with a chilling malevolence. With an echoing shriek, I suddenly felt the ground beneath me shift, and I was plunged into darkness. My body dropped, swallowed whole by the abyss, the sensation one of plummeting deeper into despair than I had ever known. Pain exploded within my chest as spectral hands clawed at me, pulling me in every direction, each tug demanding my allegiance. But in that infinite void, clarity struck once more. Anger surged to the surface, the ferocity of my will bursting forth, like a wildfire set against the night. "You want to take me," I roared, drawing from the core of my existence, thrusting against the shadows that sought to claim me. A blinding light erupted around me, sending the figures recoiling, their faces warping in agony, and I gasped as I was thrust back into the world, a reality still tinged with the whispers of their torment. But this time I didn't falter. I was still a tethered marionette, yet I now held the knife to cut the strings. With each breath seeping through my lungs, I knew I had tapped into something profound. The dark power of the altar reached out, and I grasped it. But the shadows trembled in response. They would not go quietly. Just as I began to weave this energy around me like a shield, a piercing silence enveloped the forest. Time seemed to stretch infinitely as a chilling dread squirmed in my gut. The air thickened again, and with a visceral dread, I felt the shadows converging, their hunger rekindled, fueled by my defiance. "Let the darkness consume you," they hissed, their skeletal fingers weaving into a cacophony of night. "You cannot escape your fate." In that moment, a sudden realization surrounded me. There would be no escape if I fell under their thrall again. I could feel myself teetering on the edge, the choice either to rise with the darkness or drown in the void. But I had made my decision, unleashing a light filled with fury, a beacon in the dark, and then I heard it a sharp crack, followed by the sound of splintering wood beneath me. The altar shook violently, splatters of darkened blood erupting from within its crevices, revealing that it housed something malevolent, something insatiable before I could react. A shape emerged from the altar, something horrific and magnificent, its shadowy form looming larger than the trees themselves. It drifted upwards, images flickering across its surface, faces of those I knew, those I lost, and they all merged into a singular, terrifying epitome of suffering. "Your time has come," it bellowed, as the ground quaked beneath me and the darkness surged in a frenzy of wrath. "You cannot defy your destiny." And paralyzed with horror, I could only watch as the shadows coalesced, twisting into a monstrous form, ready to unleash unimaginable terror within the night. My heart raced and the world faded around me, consumed by darkness, as I prepared to confront that which transcended all fears, and then felt the unbearable touch of cold hands clasping my throat. That I wasn't merely trapped within a moment. I was ensnared in a horror that fed upon fear, and there would be no turning back. The sensation of icy fingers around my throat sent a jolt of raw terror racing through my veins, and I blinked hard to fight the encroaching darkness. Panic hammered in my chest, smothering my ability to think, but the dread grounding me in that grotesque reality only intensified. I struggled against the spectral hands, gasping for breath as they tightened their grip, every touch like a vengeful vice squeezing the life from me. The creature's visage twisted above me, shifting like the tide on a troubled sea. The faces flickered within its obsidian form, each one a tortured reflection of a soul long lost. My friends, my family forever trapped in the torment of this realm. I felt a wave of despair crash over me, threatening to drag me down with them. There was power here, but it thrummed not just with anguish. It resonated with a sinister allure. The longer I lingered in this violent nexus between light and dark, the more vivid the memories became, churning inside my mind like a maelstrom. "Join us. Embrace the eternal night," the creature bellowed, its voice a shifting, echoing symphony of hopeless cries. I felt my resolve waver, my thoughts teetering on the precipice of surrender, mesmerizing images of the past luring me closer to its grasp. "Let go, let go." The rasping whispers grew louder, circling like vultures. "Your memories are nothing but chains. Surrender and you shall know true freedom." A scream clawed at the back of my throat, raw and desperate. I didn't want freedom in darkness. I wanted the light, the warmth of human connection, the love of my friends, but it felt so distant now, like the fading echoes of a lullaby only half remembered. Summoning every thread of strength that remained, I clawed against the shadowy binds. "No," I spat, a flicker of fury igniting within my heart. "You have no hold over me." My defiance unleashed a tremor in the air, and for a fleeting moment, the creature faltered, the faces swirling within its mass flinching from my resolve. With one violent motion, I wrenched myself away from the cold embrace. It felt like tearing through a veil of ice, every fragmented memory searing as I pulled free from the clutch of despair. The altar groaned beneath me, a wild crescendo swelling as shadows twisted and writhed in madness. The beast lashed out again, its immense void-like limbs flinging towards me, but I rolled sideways, just managing to evade the brunt of its fury. I could feel the cold residue of its energy brush against my skin, leaving behind an insatiable hunger, a yearning to sink back into that all-consuming darkness. Dread clung to the air like fog, suffocating and disorienting. But there was no time to ponder the weight of that choice, not now. I scrambled to my feet, the roots of the forest clawing at my ankles, the very ground hungry for my surrender. In front of me, the creaturesque shadow roared, limbs stretching impossibly wide, dark matter swirling like a storm, ready to swallow the last light in anticipation of crushing my spirit. And then a brilliant pulse burst forth from my chest, a radiant beam igniting the shadows around me. For a breath of time, the forest illuminated, revealing twisted trees laden with unearthly symbols carved deep into their bark, delicate wisps of light flickering like fading stars. I gasped, suddenly aware that the lantern I had brought, a mere flicker of hope, had transported me to this moment. "Use it," a faint voice whispered through the cacophony, drowned in chaos but unmistakable. There was guidance amidst the terror, a last vestige of the living crying out from beyond. But the creature surged forward. The shadows writhed in a frenzy, consuming any trace of light. You cannot escape. The darkness hungers. You are but a whisper, and we the roaring storm. Suddenly, with a gut-wrenching lurch, the altar shattered beneath my feet. The ground cracked open, jagged edges spiraling apart, revealing an eerily luminescent abyss below, beckoning with a siren's song of succumbing to the void. In that petrifying moment, I was faced with an impossible choice. Did I hold on to the flicker of light and risk being torn apart by the beast above, or did I embrace the darkness beneath, descending into the unending night? With the whisper of the forest fading behind me, I drew upon every ounce of defiance left and hurled the lantern into the abyss. As it fell, the shadows shrieked a high-pitched wail of agony that pierced my mind, and the tremors of chaos reached a fever pitch. My heart pounded in tune with the frantic energy, and I caught one last glimpse of my friends' faces flickering before me, caught in the swirling maelstrom of fear and regret. Then everything erupted into blinding light, followed by an all-encompassing silence, a tension so dense, I felt ready to fracture. And just as I thought I had broken free from my fate, a great hand emerged from the dark depths, a hand that gripped my ankle, dragging me towards the unimaginable abyss below. No! I screamed, my voice swallowed by both darkness and light as the forest around me distorted into a hollow echo. With every ounce of strength, I fought against the grip, but darkness fed off my fear, and the last of my screams resonated through the night as I was pulled into the depths where shadows thrived. The echo of my voice faded, mingling with the cacophony of torment above. And then silence. The silence was suffocating, a blanket of undisturbed darkness that held me in a vice-like grip. I felt the cold embrace of the void seeping through my skin, chilling my very soul, and I was left with the maddening realization that I wasn't simply in the absence of sound, I was enveloped in something alive, something hungry. As I floated within that formless despair, time lost its meaning. Hours could have passed, or merely moments. There was no way to tell. With each aching heartbeat, the insidious whispers from the depths crept closer, soft and sinister, swirling through my thoughts like phantoms, each syllable laden with despair. Welcome, welcome, they cooed, to the place where all things come to rest, where shadows weave tales untold. In that suffocating quiet, I began to perceive faint echoes, rippling like distant water. Glimpses of memories, both eerie and enchanting, danced just beyond reach, a flicker of laughter, the warmth of a shared moment. Enemies turned friends, joys entwined with sorrow. They drifted around me like flotsam on a dark sea, each offering a taste of life I no longer had. Suddenly, a piercing shriek shattered the silence, unnaturally sharp and echoing, pulling me toward the surface of consciousness. I gasped, choking on the void as if it had nestled inside me during my descent. And in that gasp, clarity momentarily crystallized. I felt weight against my skin, a tension, like strings pulled taut beneath the surface. Something was watching, something ancient and unfathomable, pulling at my essence with an insistent yearning. Help me! I shouted into the abyss, yet the words were quickly consumed by the consuming dark. I could sense a vast presence shifting, coiling itself around me, spiraling through the fabric of my being. Please, I begged, and I didn't recognize the raw desperation in my voice. It echoed back like a confession lost in the drumming void. A sliver of luminescence flickered in the nothingness, drawing me toward it. Hesitantly, I drifted closer, the pull both magnetic and unsettling. But as I reached it, the light twisted, forming a shape, a face that morphed in and out of clarity, a mask of lingering sorrow and resigned malice. The pressure in the air thickened, and I felt like I was suffocating beneath the weight of her ethereal gaze. Why do you resist? The figure asked, her voice a haunting lullaby tangled with echoes of grief. You seek something that was never yours to hold. The past is a trap, and so too is hope. I shivered under the intensity of her presence. Vulnerability, now a downpour crashing over my senses. Memories swirled violently, threatening to overwhelm me. The faces of my friends loomed large, their breaths now caged within the confines of that relentless darkness. Each one of them intertwined with threads of past choices and unanswered calls, drowning in the weight of what could have been. No, I gasped, grip tightening on the fabric of my own will. I am not lost. I refuse to become one with this darkness. My voice sparked like dry grass meeting fire, igniting something deep within the void. The rift around me trembled, and the woman's face warped with anger, sharp and jagged like the shards of glass. You speak of defiance, but know this: freedom demands a price you are not willing to pay. Would you embrace despair to save them? To save yourself? Then the ground beneath me rippled, fracturing into endless paths of swirling darkness, each one pulling at my essence like predatory hands. Glimpses of their faces, those I loved, twisted, writhing in agony, trapped in that infinite spiral of torment. I screamed, horror surging. The darker reality weighed upon me, visions of abandonment gnawing deeper. The specter sneered, and with a sweeping gesture, the void erupted towards my heart, its dark tendrils ready to entangle me. I flailed against the constraining forces, ripples of terror coursing through me, but the yearning to hold onto my past clawed at my thoughts. The creature bared its teeth in a glistening snarl, and its voice rang out with climactic intensity. You are bound to us. In a desperate bid, I concentrated on that dim flame of hope flickering just beyond the vastness of my despair. Fueled by fury, I reached for it, pulling harder than I ever had before, drawing energy from my memories, every moment spent in laughter, love, and connection. I will not fall. Just as the darkness closed in, encroaching upon the light within, I felt a rush surrounding me, igniting pathways through the shadows, a rush leading me upward. Like roots writhing towards the surface, the creature recognized my command. However, as the expanse of darkness trembled and began to shatter, a bone-chilling caress swept through the air. A whisper of betrayal echoed, "You cannot run from the truth." Suddenly, I was hurled upward, light blinding, bursting through the echoing silence, but not before one last agonizing image burned into my mind. A familiar figure watching from the edge of that abyss, grinning with a satisfaction drenched in longing, a reflection of my own inner turmoil, and then everything shattered into obscurity. The ground beneath me was no longer an endless void, but a mosaic of damp leaves crumbled underfoot. I stumbled back, the rough bark of the gnarled tree catching my breath as I steadied myself. Heart hammering, I blinked against the piercing sunlight filtering through the dense canopy above. Each beam a harsh reminder of reality after the darkness that had refused to loosen its grip. A cacophony of chirps and rustling leaves surrounded me, infusing the air with vibrant life, yet dread nestled in my stomach like a volcanic hibernation. I was no longer floating through that oppressive darkness, but now I found myself in an eerie woodland, absorbing that familiar and disquieting chill that seemed to exude from the very ground, an echo of the infernal backdrop I had recently escaped. The quietude was palpable. It felt as though the forest held its breath, as though every creature had been suspended in anticipation of my every move. A gnawing apprehension quickly morphed into an overwhelming urge to flee. But where could I go? Each step felt heavy, like sinking into the loamy earth beneath me. I turned, the tangled underbrush whispering secrets from my past, just as that malevolent voice had promised. Shadows elongated unnaturally among the trees, twining around every gnarled branch, each one beckoning with something sinister. Sweat trickled down my brow, leaving a path against my skin that felt both foreign and familiar as shivers of apprehension coursed through me. Then came the sounds, the guttural swells of murmuring voices, echoing through the trees, shrouded in thick layers of uncertainty. I strained to understand them, and for a moment, they melded into the echoes of laughter from friends long gone, a playful melody twisted into something unspeakably dreadful. Help me, it was barely a whisper, lost among the rustling leaves, yet it sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. My heart quickened as icy fingers of dread explored my spine. I hesitated, swaying at the crossroads of compassion and terror. Every fiber of my being urged me to listen. Following the voice was a deadly instinct, but there was no turning back now. I moved deeper into the heart of the forest, the gnarled roots curling like the fingers of the damned, desperate to clasp onto something tangible, a remnant of my past or just an illusion that would lead me into the abyss once more. And then I saw her sitting against the twisted trunk of a tree, her figure obscured in shadow yet suffused with a ghastly light as if the sun itself had mislaid its warmth at her feet. My pulse raced as I succumbed to the gravitational pull of her presence. She radiated a sorrow that threatened to drown me. But her eyes bore messages from forgotten days, haunting echoes of memories shared, and shadows breathed in trepidation. Lena, I breathed, recognizing her as the girl who had pressured me into the expedition that led to our lives fracturing. What happened? Where are the others? Her lips twisted into a hollow grin, tremors of despair rippling behind her gaze. They're here like the rest of us. But they didn't listen. Didn't heed the warnings. She raised a frail hand, pointing toward the distance where whispered laughter drifted through the trees. You were meant to join us. A wave of nausea crashed over me. The laughter morphed into something derisive, an ugly chorus that twisted itself like barbed wire around my heart. No, you can't be serious. We have to leave. I stumbled backward, but my movement unearthed a multitude of eyes hidden within the foliage one by one. They emerged, a circle of friends whose faces faded into obscurity. Stay with us, they crooned sweetly, their voices weaving together, carrying a persuasiveness that made my head throb. We waited for you. You were always the one we craved. Just step forward, release the fear. The forest darkened, the shadows growing long and thick, swallowing what feeble light had managed to penetrate. I fought against the instinct to approach, the allure of what was once familiar drawing me closer to the brink of despair. Don't. Lena wept, her voice quaking. You don't understand. They let you leave, but it was too late. The ground trembled beneath my feet as I recoiled in terror, ripping my gaze from the friends around me. That haunting whisper, the original voice from the void, returned, echoing through the air like knife-point wielding wind. Join us. Embrace the truth of your choices. Fear clutched my throat. I turned to run, but the forest had shifted in a heartbeat, narrowing my options, squeezing shadows around me as walls of darkness encroached closer. I could hear their voices, mingled with treats of betrayal, each syllable wrapped in the coldness of betrayal. You can't escape your fate. I sprinted, the rustling leaves now a demonic orchestra cheering my descent into madness. But I could see something darker ahead, a marooned figure swaying in the periphery of my vision. Its limbs distorted, mouthing prayers that fell like shadows, echoing long-lost names. That I skidded to a stop, my breath trapped in my chest as I caught sight of them, a silhouette of a man, his features obscured by tangles of twigs and shadows. Then, the sky darkened further, and the whispers morphed into deafening wails of 1,000 lost souls, filled with despair, beckoning me closer to my fate. Turn back, they implored as the figure turned, revealing a grin split wide across his face, the familiar sight clawing at my sanity. It's time to choose, and the darkness has already spoken your name. The forest grew still. Even the wind ceased to stir as I stood frozen, choices colliding like rogue currents. Fear gripped me once more, this time more suffocating than before, as I braced against the impossible truth. The light was only an illusion, and with every step forward, I felt my past entwining itself deeper into the roots of darkness, and before I could react, the earth shuddered violently once more, and the shadows lunged toward me from every direction, their cries coiling around my throat, leaving the only question lingering in the air. Just how much of myself was I willing to sacrifice to unveil the darkness lurking within? The ground beneath me bucked and twisted, pulling at my feet like a lost lover desperate to retain a bond severed by fear. I felt weighed down, trapped in an invisible net, woven by the shadows that lurked behind every tree. Panic flooded through my veins, my breath hitching as I fought to stay anchored to the precipice of sanity. Join us. The voices cooed again, dripping with an unsettling sweetness that made bile rise in my throat. Just beyond them, I could see the figure with the grotesque grin still standing, swaying slightly as though entranced. Instinctively, I took a step back, my heart lurching as I turned to flee deeper into the forest. Twisted branches flanked me, their long fingers grasping, as if wanting to pull me into their embrace. The darkness began to deepen, becoming a thick, palpable fog that clung to my skin, seeping into my very essence. I could still hear Lena's desperate warning echoing painfully in my mind. They won't let you leave. I stumbled through the looming haze, pressing onward despite the disembodied symphony of laughter and the cacophony of murmurs filled with promises that slithered through the air like snakes. But what terrified me most was the creeping knowledge that they truly knew me better than I knew myself. They thrived, feasting on my vulnerabilities, my sins, the very things I wished to bury. Suddenly, the malevolent figure surged forward, his body twisting unnaturally as he broke free from the shadows. In that moment, his eyes glinted maliciously, reflecting a stark awareness that chilled me to the marrow. "You're afraid," he rasped, his voice a haunting melody that crawled under my skin. "That's why you must stay." I fought against the swirling dark, tearing away from the luring whispers and the nightmarish visage. Yet every turn I took, the forest twisted with malevolent glee, morphing into a maze of terrors that shifted and moved with each desperate attempt to escape. I was ensnared in a cruel game played by incomprehensible entities that watched me, relishing every misstep. "Let go of your past," the figure howled, and his voice transformed into the screams of my friends, urging me towards a truth I was terrified to face. "Your choices bind you, but you can still join us. One sweet surrender is all it takes." At that moment, horror struck anew, a realization coursing through me that chilled any remnants of warmth left in my heart. I lunged toward a path that glimmered faintly through the fog, the remnants of sunlight strangled by the overhanging branches, a beacon of hope, or perhaps a trap. Yet I had no choice but to gamble on that flicker. But the moment I reached the clearing, my heart dropped. It was an altar shrouded in thick ivy, encircled by skeletal remains of what I could only assume were sacrifices of the past. Flickering embers from a dying fire illuminated a scene both beautiful and grotesque, a grand tapestry of memories wrapped in pain and longing. Grinning faces stared back at me, eyes alight with madness and a need for acknowledgement. The figure surged forth again, monstrous in its intent, the shadows behind him brimming with discontent. "You will remember," he said with a voice that vibrated through the air like a funeral bell. "You will be one of us just like your friends." "No," I screamed, the echoes rebounding against the trees. But it was all-consuming now, the past rushing towards me in a vortex of despair. I felt memories scraping at the edges of my consciousness, urging to break free, a rising tide of forgotten regrets, suffocating my thoughts. And then, a quiet emerged, punctuated only by the frantic drumming of my heartbeat. The laughter and the whispers fell silent, leaving only the rustling of leaves and distant murmurings of something ancient yet familiar. The ground beneath me began to pulse like a living entity, resonating with a rhythm akin to breathing. I could sense it pulling me forward, deeper into the heart where dread coiled ever tighter. Suddenly, shadows erupted around me, thrumming with energy as the malignant figure lunged towards me with an outstretched hand, a menacing grin illuminating his twisted features. My breath caught as I realized he wasn't just a harbinger of the darkness. It was an invitation. An invitation to succumb, to let go of the weight of my past and dissolve into this harrowing unity. But just as I prepared to break free of their grasp, a shriek pierced through the air. My friends had returned, their faces twisted in a macabre semblance of joy. "Join us. Become one with the night. Don't let fear govern your heart." Terror surged through me, unrelenting and raw, and as I turned to flee one last time, the earth heaved beneath my feet. In an instant, I lost my balance and plummeted into a yawning chasm of darkness, the last breaths of the forest rising to meet me with a scream resonating from my very core, an oracle of agony and catharsis unfurling its wings in a cyclone of dread. And in that horrifying descent, as my mind twisted into a spiral of fractured memories and impending loss, the whispering darkness enveloped me, and the haunting chorus erupted once more, mangling my name into a singular question that clawed its way to the surface like the eager hands of the damned. What will you sacrifice to uncover the truth lurking within? The moment the shadows engulfed me, I found myself suspended in a realm beyond comprehension, a liminal space where time twisted and reality bent in spirals of despair. Darkness pulsed around me, an echo of every regret and fear I had ever known. And the etched faces of my friends swirled in my mind, their laughter fading into wails of torment. Each flickering memory tore at me like ravenous claws, demanding my attention, my submission. Feeding off my dread, I could see them, trapped within the very fabric of this darkness. Their souls shrouded in eternal unrest, lost, but not forgotten. Forsaken, yet forever haunting. I leaned into their whispers, the clamor of their voices rising to a fever pitch, filling my head with their maddening insistence. Join us. You must succeed where we failed. I was the one they ultimately desired, the one who had strayed too far into the shadows. Panic suffocated me, yet a morbid curiosity pushed me deeper, urging me to uncover the truth of this cursed existence. Struggling against the encroaching fear, every heartbeat against the silence roared in defiance. I refuse. My voice, though trembling, had power, a flicker of resolve within that stifling void. I felt myself propelled forward, a shift in the current of despair, landing once more on solid earth. My feet slammed into the warm, moist ground, and I was back, the forest surrounding me eerily tranquil. Only the soft whispers still echoed, intertwining themselves through the branches overhead, tugging at the edges of clarity. My gaze fell upon the altar, still bathed in shadows, pulsating with a life of its own. It was a twisting anomaly, a portal, a place of sacrifice where the souls of the lost were tethered, and the price for existence here was steep. And just as dread surged once more in my veins, the air buzzed electric with knowledge, the realization dawning that this place did not simply consume. It traded, whispered away souls, and fed itself by the agony of those who dare not leave. Suddenly, a figure sprang forth from the altar, a familiar face contorted in anguish, locked forever between dimensions. A spectral version of Lena, who had lured me into this nightmare, stood there. You were meant to be one of us. Choose. Her voice quivered like the sour note of a broken string, torn between pleading and hostility. And then, it struck me like a lightning bolt. This wasn't merely a curse. It was a cycle, a relentless loop tying me to my choices and my fears. Those who had come before me begged for release, but I recognized now that I had unwittingly mirrored them. All those tales I collected, those echoes of despair, all were manifestations of my own impending fate. The shadowed figures surrounding us were not simply trapped. Their essence pulsed in resonance with the ground, feeding on fear and regret. Each soul forever linked to the other, bound by the stories whispered into the dark. Energy spiraled around me. Shadows sought the tender parts of my soul, and as the tendrils wrapped themselves tighter, I gasped. This tether between us had been born from my very own words, from the fascination that had drawn me here, the hunger for the darkness. No! I screamed, a desperate surge rising in my throat, but it was too late. The shadows laughed, a cacophony of distorted echoes that mocked my resolve. It is already yours, they hissed. You have never left. I stumbled backward, the forest shifting around me, the ground trembling with the weight of my revelation. I was not merely an observer but a participant. My thoughts had ignited this cycle, and the entity lurking beneath the altar had no intention of letting me go. Every story I collected had birthed an insatiable hunger, a void yearning to consume every moment of light still tethered to me. Suddenly, the energy twisted violently. Before my eyes, the altar warped, forming grotesque images of those I had lost. Ethereal fingers clawed in anguish. Feed us! They shrieked, their echoes mocking my own despair. And in that horrifying revelation, the truth hit harder than the grasp of shadows. I realized the cyclical nature of this horror. I could not escape without sacrificing that which made me whole. The darkness offered liberation, but at the cost of everything I cherished, and each soul lost had condemned me just as they were. As the shadows lunged toward me, I felt the weight of every decision crashing down around me, the choice to take those tales, to engage with this darkness. I hesitated, and they drew nearer, anticipation swelling within their grasp. Before I could reconsider, I did the only thing I could think. You want me? I roared, pain and resolution mingling in my voice. Take me then. I'll sacrifice myself if it means freeing them. Instantly, everything fell silent. I was seized by an immense force, the light within me dimming as tendrils of darkness wrapped around my heart. Yes, they whispered, blissful satisfaction wrapping around my mind, ready to consume me whole, and I prepared myself a final act of defiance. But in that chilling moment, a piercing wail erupted from the depths of the shadows. No, Lena's voice fragmented through the silence. You can't give yourself to the darkness. Don't become one of us. And the terror struck hard within me, igniting a primal instinct to fight, to burst forth from whatever twisted fate lay before me. The shadows rippled, their cruelty wavering as they recoiled from my unwillingness to comply. No, I screamed with newfound strength, harnessing every fiber of my being. I won't let you have me. I steadied my breath, drawing courage from the flames of defiance surging inside. I wasn't going to succumb to the dark tempted fate. I would sever my ties and use the knowledge I had gained to thwart it. In a furious flurry, I thrust my hands toward the altar, glaring into the swirling depths, fierce and unyielding. I am not the darkness I sought to understand. I wasn't the culmination of the sacrifices I struggled against. Even within the void, I had the power to sever these ties. The insidious whispers shrieked in protest as the altar shattered, pouring forth an explosive wave of energy that tore through the shadows, severing their grasp. And I was consumed by light, a brilliant blaze, quiet yet omnipotent, pushing against every murmur of despair and every thread of darkness threatening to bind me. The shield formed, lifting me gently into the light, and reality twisted as the edges of darkness frayed into ribbons. Lena's voice floated through the air, choked with urgency. You must remember you can be free. As I burst forth through the veil between dreams and reality, the world around me collapsed into shadows, but I felt the cool earth beneath my feet. Grass softened my landing, and I staggered back from the altar, glimpsing the writhing darkness retreating into shadows. But even as I fell back onto the cool trail, breathing heavily, a creeping dread settled within me. Because in that moment of liberation, I realized this wasn't over. The shadowy embodiment of my suffering had simply been hidden, waiting until the next soul unknowingly offered its sustenance. And I would become the custodian of the darkness it craved stories, and I had a seeking heart. How could I not tell its tales? The curse lived on. I had escaped its clutches, yet deep within, the roots of fear had entwined my existence. As the inept silence enveloped me, I understood I had merely relinquished control. I was still tethered forever, changed by the shadows I evaded, the darkness whispering beneath the surface, where the hungry darkness waited until I returned to the altar to feed it once more. And so, the forest breathed around me, a witness to my hidden confession. I am no different from them. I will always be drawn back to this cursed trail.